Welcome back to Die. You know, sometimes you're scrolling through your feed or maybe just catching the news and you get this feeling. It's 2025, but wow, some of these narratives feel like a direct flight back 20s teen, maybe 20
Oh, absolutely. Like deja vu.
Exact. There's this persistent echo. It really feels like a big chunk of the mainstream media is, well, kind of blaming MAGA for almost everything.
For literally every little thing going on, yeah.
Right. We're talking reactions to, like, the Cracker Barrel logo.
It is wild.
To how people see an actress like Sydney, and our sources even mention it, terror. It gets tiring, you know? And honestly, a bit confusing. So today, that's our mission. We want to cut through that noise, really dig into our sources, and try to understand what's actually driving this trend, what's behind it, and what does it really mean for, you know, how we all talk about things.
Precisely. Because look, there's so much information flying around, headlines screaming. Yeah. It's easy to get lost. So our goal for you listening right now is to get past just the surface. We're here to help you spot these patterns, see what really stands out about these sweeping accusations.
Yeah.
And hopefully help you understand not just what's being said, but maybe why it's being said.
Yeah.
And what the real, sometimes subtle impact is on society, our conversations, even just how we see the world.
Okay, so let's dive into that. The central idea from our sources, how MAGA has become this massive umbrella label. It seriously feels like everything is getting tagged with it, even when the first reactions or the issue itself were way, way broader, like not political at all.
And that's the fascinating part, isn't it? How the term itself has changed.
Yeah.
Our sources describe it as becoming this nebulous catch-all boogeyman. That's a direct quote.
Wow, nebulous catch-all boogeyman.
Yeah, used for pretty much anything a certain part of the media doesn't like. And, you know, this isn't totally new. Our sources point out that the goalposts for these kinds of labels, they've been moving for a while.
Yeah, so?
Well, they trace this progression. It started with things like, you know, Nazis, then it shifted, maybe alt-right, then far-right, white supremacists.
Right, I remember that sequence.
And now it seems firmly landed on MAGA. And what's really striking, according to our sources, is that this label gets slapped even on people they describe as just in the middle or just rational center.
So not even necessarily conservative, moderate, or maybe just disagreeing on one thing.
Exactly. And this whole evolution, it's not just about sticking labels on people. Our sources suggest it actually chips away at, you know, public discourse itself. It makes it super hard to talk about real problems when everything instantly gets polarized and, like, stripped of any nuance.
Yeah, it just shuts down conversation.
Totally. It builds echo chambers.
Yeah.
Real policy debates get swapped out for just, you know, painting villains.
Right.
Which makes you ask, right? What's the actual, like, tangible effect of labeling things so broadly? Yeah. And sometimes, let's be honest, inaccurately. How does that affect our ability to even understand problems, let alone solve them?
That's a really, really important question. It pushes us past just noticing it to thinking about the real world effects, not just words. It's how they land, how they shape what. And to really get a handle on that impact, let's look at some specific examples our sources brought up, starting with one that sounds almost boring, the Cracker Barrel logo change.
Right. But it's surprisingly revealing.
What our sources found about the initial reaction is pretty interesting. It wasn't just a few grumpy people online.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
What's so telling about the Cracker Barrel thing is how fast a really widespread feeling got sort of politically repackaged.
Oh.
The material we looked at shows the initial dislike for the new logo was huge.
Okay.
In fact, our sources found that even the Democratic Party, DNC, and Gavin Newsom, on their official X account, they made fun of Cracker Barrel at first. They actually said the logo sucks.
Seriously, the DNC's official.
Yep. So this wasn't a right-wing thing or a left-wing thing to start. It was just people didn't like the logo. Bipartisan thumbs down.
So almost everyone hated it, but then the narrative.
Exactly. Despite this very public bipartisan dislike, our sources show that some media outlets then tried to turn it into a MAGA thing.
Yeah.
The core argument from the sources is that people all across the board just thought the logo change was, you know, stupid and dumb and pointless.
Okay, but why? Just aesthetic.
Well, the reason given in the source material is that people are just tired of everything being stripped of its personality down to, like, the bare minimum minimalist crap.
That whole trend.
To try to save money for corporations. It had, and this is a direct quote again, nothing to do with people being on the right or the left.
Makes sense. People just like character.
And here's a really interesting twist. Apparently, even some investors, including some described as leaning left, were so mad they keep assuming the backlash was purely political that they actually pushed for a walk back on some of the...
Wow. So the assumption it must be political actually caused a financial...
Kind of ironic, right? It shows what happens when the narrative completely misses the actual public mood. Money talk, even when the commentary is confused.
That really is telling. It shows not all pushback is about ideas. And just to hammer home how far this narrative went, one source points to a quote from The Guardian paper.
Yeah.
They apparently wrote, The Cracker Barrel backlash shows MAGA's US.
From the UK, about Cracker Barrel.
Right. Our sources were pretty baffled by that. They ask, why is a UK paper weighing in on what they call a very American restaurant chain, Southern American culture, in such a politically charged way? It's like the political angle was more interesting globally than a bad.
It definitely shows how far these specific political narratives can travel, doesn't it? And maybe how tempting they are as a shorthand, even when the real story is just corporate branding.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Another big example our sources highlight involves actress Sydney. This one has like two different incidents that show this pattern. First, there was that jeans commercial. Our sources describe it pretty blunt. They say dumbass activists thought that it was eugenics based on what was clearly a joke.
Eugenics? From a jeans ad.
Yeah. They say the activists implied it to be some Aryan race, some bullshit, which is not what they said at all. And then, predictably, the media tried to frame the whole meltdown, as they call it, as somehow MAGA's fault.
Wow. That's quite a leap. And that wasn't the only time with her.
Right. No, our sources also mention a photo from the Madam Web movie set.
Okay, what happened there?
Yeah.
Well, the description in the source material is that accusations started flying. Claims that Sweeney was deliberately put center of attention to push the black girls to the outside. Some called it pathetic and a racist agenda.
Just based on a photo.
Yeah. Our sources describe that really strongly, calling it projecting this false-ass narrative onto a photo.
It's amazing how fast these things can spiral around one person, especially when you think about what our sources point out, that folks on the left have loved people like Sweeney before.
Right, she was popular.
Yeah. But then, the moment they're seen to maybe go against the narrative, whatever that means, suddenly they're no longer welcome. They instantly become public enemy number one.
Yeah.
It really suggests this kind of unfair purity test, as the sources put it. Like, your actual views don't matter as much as whether you seem perfectly aligned on everything all the time.
Mm-hmm. Nuance gets lost.
So, okay, we've seen these patterns. Cracker Barrel's logo, Sydney Sweeney. Things that start out maybe broad or complicated or even just silly, and they get funneled into this one specific political box.
Yeah.
But the big question for our deep dive, why? What's really driving this? Our sources dig into this, and it's maybe more complicated than just pure politics.
Yeah, what's really interesting here is that our sources suggest it's not always or even primarily about ideology. It's often about, well, desperation for attention. Clicks.
Eyeballs.
In the media market, you mean.
Exactly. They talk about this intense focus on desperately getting clicks and using all the right SEO buzzwords. Getting noticed, they argue, often trumps everything else.
They even give a specific example, Rolling Stone. The source notes it doesn't talk about music much anymore. It's all about Trump.
Huh. I guess I have noticed that shift.
And the source says basically they love this for all their bitching about Trump and MAGA. It drives traffic.
So controversy sells, essentially.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
The source uses this great phrase, clickbait word salad, just throwing keywords together. They say many media outlets are frankly dying and just looking for hits to stay afloat. And that really warps their priorities, moving from informing people to just provoking a reaction, any reaction.
That actually makes a lot of sense thinking about how online content works now. It's less about depth, more about going viral now.
Okay.
And to back that up, the sources mention another example, a Gap jeans commercial. This one deliberately featured all these women who weren't white, clearly trying to, make a statement, do a counter thing.
Okay, so the opposite kind of message.
Right. But guess what? According to our sources, hardly anybody even cared or talked about it.
It just fizzled.
Yeah. It didn't generate that instant outrage or meltdown like the Sweeney example, which kind of proves the point, doesn't it? This desperate need for clicks seems to reward controversy, maybe even negativity, over just a positive or different message. Relevance seems tied to noise.
It's a tough cycle for media outlets to be caught in, I suppose.
So given this whole dynamic, the click chasing, the SEO focus, the resulting media strategies, what's the actual impact? How does this affect our politics, the way we talk to each other? What are the real consequences when you frame so many different things through this one very narrow, very charged?
Well, connecting the dots, our sources argue pretty strongly that this constant labeling, these unfair purity tests, they actually backfire. They create unintended results.
Oh, so?
They argue that by constantly blaming everyone and calling everybody MAGA, even for things you guys started, their words, it's actually pushing everybody to the right.
Really? Pushing them right.
That's the argument. That many people vote for Trump, for example, not because they're Trump supporters necessarily, but because he was the better alternative, the lesser of two evils.
Yeah.
It becomes a reaction against what they see as unfair or over-the-top attack, rather than a genuine embrace of the ideology.
So the demonization itself can strengthen the other side.
Ironically, yes. That's the perspective in our source material. It can solidify opposition.
And it's not just voting, right? Our sources mentioned something about corporations, too.
Yeah, that was fascinating. They pointed out that big companies like Discovery, Amazon, Paramount, they started rolling back some of their wokeness and DEI in it, diversity, equity, inclusion, and changing certain policies before Trump even got elected.
Oh, before. not because of him.
Not according to this source material. The reason given was that they were losing a lot of money.
Ah, the bottom line.
Exact. It highlights a shift driven more by finances, maybe less by pure ideology, a kind of pragmatic, maybe even bipartisan course correction based on business reality, not just politics.
That suggests the landscape is more complex than just left versus right influencing everything.
For sure. And it brings up a really important question. Who are these narratives actually serving? And whose voices are getting lost or maybe amplified? Our sources introduce this powerful idea about what they call Middle America's voice.
Okay, Middle America's voice. What about it?
They suggest that Middle America felt drowned out for over a decade, maybe even, quote, closer to 15 years, by what they frame as dominant New York and LA voices setting the cultural tone.
Yeah, you hear that sentiment sometimes.
And now, the sources argue, these communities feel like they're finally getting a voice again. And that's why outlets like Fox News see high ratings, because they perceive them as speaking for Middle America.
Right.
And critically, the sources stress that the majority of these people are actually in the middle or lean slightly left or right, not at the extremes. It's this huge, often overlooked group reacting to feeling ignored or misrepresented.
And that really seems like the crux of it, doesn't it? Our sources hammer this point. The majority of these people are in the middle. Mm-hmm. And constantly insulting them and telling them that they're idiots, well, it just pushes them away. It might even push them towards the very positions the media claims to be fighting against.
It seems like a totally self-defeating strategy. If your actual goal is to persuade people or have a genuine conversation, it just digs deeper trenches instead of building any bridges.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, looking back at the source material, what really emerges is this clear pattern, right? Certainly. This super broad, almost scattershot use of MAGA as a label for everything by some media outlets. It doesn't always seem to be about actual political alignment. No. Instead, it often looks more like a symptom of this desperate hunt for clicks, for engagement, just for relevance in a really tough media.
Yeah, survival tactics almost.
Yeah. And the big risk is that it ends up totally misrepresenting how a lot of people actually feel about things. And it alienates this huge, diverse group in the middle who feel like they're not being heard, or worse, being unfairly judged.
And just to reiterate, many of the specific things we talked about, like that initial backlash to the Cracker Barrel logo, or even how people first reacted to a Sydney Sweeney ad, they started out as just broad public opinion. Lots of different feelings mixed together, not neatly fitting into one political box.
Right. They weren't inherently political.
Exactly. But then they got framed that way, twisted to fit a narrative that would get attention. And that's a really crucial difference that gets lost in all the shouting. It just simplifies things way too much.
It really does. And that leads us to maybe a final thought, something for you, our listener, to chew on. Our source material actually includes this interesting reflection from their own host. They talk about identifying as Democrats until around 2018, and they feel their own politics haven't really shifted much since then, but now they find themselves getting labeled completely differently.
Yeah, the ground shifted under them, in their view.
So maybe consider this in your own life, in your own conversations. How does this constant shifting of political labels, these really strict purity tests, how does that affect how people see themselves or how they affiliate in your own circles or just out there in the world?
That's a great question.
Are we all getting kind of pushed into these camps that maybe don't perfectly fit our actual, more nuanced views, forced to pick a side in fights that aren't even really ours with? Something to think about.
Definitely something to think.
Until our next deep dive.